Here we are, finally, waiting for the 5th episode of the Amazing Digital Circus, and it really managed to impress us. We finally got a more detailed look at the emotional state of the show's participants. More and more emphasis is placed on the characters, their inner world, worries, fears, and difficult fates. As previously promised Gooseworx, the 5th episode focuses on the development of Ragatha and Jax's characters. Initially, it was reported that Ragatha was to take center stage in the 5th episode, while Jax was to get his full disclosure in the 6th. However, later learned that the writers decided to split the screen time between the two characters, giving each of them a chance to prove themselves in the 5th episode and, most likely, to continue it in the next one. This decision suggests that the 5th episode serves as a kind of seed for the events of the 6th. We can assume that it is in the next episode that we will see a deeper and more detailed relationship between Ragatha and Jax. I think the episode will be more about the relationships between the three main characters, Pomni, Jax, and Ragatha. Although the focus will most likely be on Rabbit, who is still the most mysterious figure among the team. As of the current moment, viewers have already managed to find out small backstories of most of the characters in the show. However, Jax still remains in the shadows. He shies away from revelations, substituting talking about himself with sarcasm and ironic references.
And no point in asking Kinger, because there's no way he remembers anything.
Never better!
No real story about himself, well, at least publicly, has yet to come from him. Nevertheless, as early as episode 5, it becomes apparent how Jax is slowly beginning to open up, and he does so specifically around Pomni. Perhaps it is this dynamic that will have a strong influence in the next episode. It's quite possible that at some point in their adventure together, he'll share with Pomni about his experiences, talk about what he's been through, and maybe even about his old friend Ribbit. I think it's important to remember that Gooseworx in one of the official posts mentioned a certain Ribbit, a member who abstracted even before the events with Kaufmo. This mysterious frog apparently played an important role in Jax's life. In the intermission scene from Kane, an interesting detail can be noticed. Jax freezes for a moment in front of a door with a crossed-out frog. This is probably a direct allusion to his personal history, which has not yet been revealed. Also, don't forget the scene in which Ragatha dropped the line about him not having any more friends. The rabbit's reaction was extremely painful, so much so that the doll immediately tried to make amends by apologizing and leaving the conversation.
Not anymore. Oh, wait, no. I'm sorry. I wasn't talking about that. That wasn't meant to be,
This moment, as well as the whole atmosphere of the episode, as if on purpose, prepares us for further disclosure of this story, as well as the conflict of these two. As we reflect on what will happen in the 6th episode, it is important to note how another important storyline is developing, namely the relationship between Ragatha and Pomni. Throughout the episodes, one can see Ragatha trying to get closer to the new girl. At first glance, this may seem like a simple concern, characteristic of her benevolent image. However, in the context of the entire story, one gets the feeling that her desire to connect with Pomni is not just a show of sympathy for the newcomer, but something much more personal. Despite her best efforts, Pomni did not respond to the doll's friendship in the way the doll expected. Instead, she rather quickly and effortlessly began to spend more time with Jax, with whom she surprisingly began to develop a rapport. It's in the 5th episode that Ragatha constantly tries to distract Pomni from Jax by literally pulling attention to herself, and it doesn't seem like caring, but more like jealousy or fear of losing her only chance at a real friendship with someone. And if we add here the atmosphere of the final scene of the 5th episode, where Pomni leaves with Jax, and Zubul, Kinger, and Gangle head in the opposite direction, we notice an important detail. Ragatha is left alone. This is even hinted at in a recent post by Glitch Studios, which featured an illustration of a lonely Ragatha sitting alone against the backdrop of a nighttime circus. Such details in the Amazing Digital Circus never happen by accident. And most likely, this is a very obvious hint as to how her fate may play out. And going by the author's words that the 5th and 6th episodes, the rabbit and the doll, are split roughly in half, it all adds up. My guess is that during the 6th episode, Ragatha will still try to pull Pomni's attention to herself by interfering with her interactions with Jax. However, despite her best efforts, these endeavors will be futile. Gradually realizing that she is losing touch with Pomni, Ragatha will begin to distance herself not only from her, but also from the rest of the digital circus. As early as in the 5th episode, an attentive viewer could notice her bangs starting to glitch at certain moments.
I'm sorry, Jax. For bringing up that thing earlier.
Most likely, against the background of growing loneliness, emotional pressure, and inner insecurity, It is Ragatha who will be the next to start abstracting herself. However, given her nature, her tendency to hide her real emotions behind a polite smile, and her desire to always appear helpful and friendly, she probably won't dare to talk openly about her feelings. It's quite possible this process will develop gradually, first in the form of minor bugs, then in the feeling that something is wrong with her, and eventually in desperate attempts to hide it from the others. Perhaps by the end of episode 6, the other characters will begin to notice that Ragatha has changed. From that point on, the plot can focus on trying to save her without letting her finally abstract herself. After all, even if we remember the early words Gooseworx, because even if one recalls the early words of Gooseworx, the 5th episode will be the last quiet one. I think that despite the tense and uneasy relationship between the doll and the rabbit, Jax may be the one who can help her. If you think about it, Jax and Ragatha are much closer to each other than would suggest at first glance. Their life paths, judging by indirect hints, may have taken similar paths. For example, Jax's fear of corn may indicate that he used to live on a farm as well.
What is this? Why'd you do that? Can you get that thing away from me?
Are you afraid of corn?
On board! Let's go to the next adventure!
And his behavior and manner of communication suggest that his relationship with his parents may have been far from ideal. Perhaps his sarcasm, ridicule, and desire to control everything is just a form of defense developed over years of pressure and strict upbringing. Ragatha, on the other hand, instead of rebelling, has humbled herself, learned to smile, to please, and to hide her real emotions. She lives with the idea that her value is to be useful to others, while Jax chose the opposite path. It's because of their similar lives that Ragatha and Jax don't get along so well, but I think that's what should help them understand each other better in the future, and that's also why, if a doll can be helped, it should be Jax. Maybe it's even a hint that even before the circus in real life, they might have known each other somehow. What do you think about it? It's impossible not to notice another interesting and disturbing dynamic developing in parallel with the main plot. It's about Cain, of course.
I think they're enjoying the suggestion box adventures more than the me adventures. What should I do?
You should die. You should throw a beach party.
Why do you swear now?
If at the very beginning of the show he seemed to be just an eccentric, slightly insane artificial intelligence, who for the sake of entertainment arranged ridiculous and comical tests for the heroes, then, over time, his behavior began to change. With each episode, Cain showed more and more signs of instability, as if bugs were accumulating in its program base. This was also evident in the 5th episode, when Cain began to show signs of irritation, even outbursts of aggression, something uncharacteristic for an AI originally designed to entertain. We can assume that in the next episodes his condition will only worsen, and this can lead to serious consequences for the whole space of Digital Circus. After all, it is he who controls the whole world, changes reality at his discretion, and can even control the participants themselves. It's interesting to recall one of the posts from the writers, which showed all the characters facing a bright white flash, reminiscent of an explosion, while looking extremely confused. Perhaps this is a hint of the season finale, the moment when the familiar digital order begins to crumble. Perhaps in the very space of the circus will start to collapse due to the chaotic behavior of the AI. Who knows, maybe this will be the way out. And what do you think? What will happen in the next episodes? I think we won't have to guess for a long time because even Glitch Studio in their recent post with Lonely Ragatha mentioned that they won't make us wait long for new episodes. That means that episode 6 is on its way. All that's left is a little more patience. Good luck everyone and bye-bye.